Morning all. My name is James Appleyard and I'm going to be presenting my colleague Joe over here. So today's theme is going to be very much around the ISDN switch off and the move to cloud services. So I'm going to run through a quick agenda, nothing too heavy, if I can get the clicker to work. So I'm going to touch upon the ISDN market, where we've come from and where we're going to. Then going to move on to SIP trunking and the associated services to that, and the integration with Microsoft Teams as well. And then I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to talk a little bit more about hosted voice, unified communications as a service, and give you a little bit of a buyer's guide as well. So you may or may not know that the ISDN network is due to be turned off in 2025. BT announced that some years ago. And that migration journey has already started to take place. This report from the Cavell Group represents that quite well. So the blue section is the number of ISDN channels that have been migrated over to SIP. As you can see, the industry's been doing quite well. They've been helping customers move those channels into the next generation voice service. But on the right-hand side, the orange segment is the total amount of channels left to migrate. And there's, well, by all indications, about 1 million left to go. Every time Cavell update this report, it gets more and more. So we've done a good job, but there's still a long way to go. And that's really important to make sure that we're ready to go when customers are ready to make that migration step. So what is the replacement service? What are we replacing our trusty ISDN channels with? What's going to replace it? And the simple answer is SIP trunking. So it's the next progression from ISDN, in the sense that it can still use your on-premise PBX. You may need to make some changes, but it will allow you to retain that existing hardware until you're ready to make that next step into the cloud. Why use it? Why SIP? Why is it replacing it? Well, I guess the one that we music to most of your ears is a lower cost. So there's no ongoing infrastructure like there is in an ISDN. There's no BT engineer going out to the exchange doing some weird and wacky things. It's all IP based. It's VoIP. It's making a call over a data connection, very much like WhatsApp or even FaceTime, but obviously just slightly higher grade. But more importantly than that, you don't want to be going for a cost saving, really. It's the flexibility that it gives you. So flexibility in the sense that an ISDN, a traditional ISDN, you can take one, if you want to add more channels, where you're limited up to 60. If you want more than that, then you've got to start banding ISDNs together, which gets quite expensive, quite complicated to manage. With SIP trunking, you have none of that. It allows you to combine SIP channels. You can flex it up, down, whatever. You might be a seasonal business. You might want to have, for 6 months of the year, twice as many SIP channels as the rest of the year, these phone lines. And you can do that with SIP trunking, but also flexibility with the numbering that you get as well. So what I mean by that is, if you take an ISDN in Bristol, you'll have Bristol numbers on it. If you want to move or start a new office, you can't, not with those numbers. It'll be a new set of numbers. With SIP trunking, you can get numbers from all over the UK put onto one singular SIP trunk based in Bristol or elsewhere. And that means you get that national presence. You can have campaigns running into local areas with those numbers to give that local area presence. But like I said, SIP has been around for a number of years now. It's quite old hat. It's a mature product. So at Gamma, we sat down and said, well, what can we do to kind of really drive some value into what we're offering? What can we do to kind of meet the demands of the modern consumer business? And what we came up with was SIP Trunk Call Manager. I know it rolls off the tongue, but it's quite a sexy product in what it does. And what it is, it's a feature-rich overlay to SIP trunking. We can kind of describe it as a PBX extender or a PBX enhancer. And what I mean by that is it takes some of the functionality that you don't get on those cheaper and older PBXs and puts them in the cloud, so it makes them more consumable for businesses. So just to pick on a couple here, you've got call queuing. So in a traditional ISDN setup, you'd have a number of those channels put aside for those calls to be queued. For the peak hours in that business, fantastic, they're working great. But for the rest of the week, those channels are sat there doing nothing, but you're still paying for them. With SIP, we're taking those calls and queuing them in the cloud. So now you've got those phone lines free, but also you can start playing comfort messages. You can start routing the callers through to other parts of the business, and then you can start reporting on those calls as well. How long are my customers waiting on hold? How long is it taking for my staff to answer those calls and deal with those customers? Can I be doing better with that call plan? But more importantly than that is the business continuity and disaster recovery features of the product. And what I mean by that is, we've all been there, broadband goes down. Well, now you're running a VoIP telephone system on it, which means you lose your calls, or it did at least. And what I mean by that is, you can set up call routing plans in advance that in the event of these disasters, in the event of business continuity events, you can start routing traffic and all your calls to different locations. Now, that might be a satellite office, it might be a group of mobiles, but it means that your customers can always get hold of you. You're not losing those calls, you're not losing business. And that's really important. And there's something you can do with this, with also the business continuity applications as well. Now, finally, before I hand over to Joe, I'm just going to quickly touch on the Microsoft Teams, which is going to be a theme that kind of runs throughout today. And it's kind of what Gamma do in relation to this. And you may have heard of Microsoft Teams is creating quite a lot of hype. It's a relatively new product from Microsoft, but it's definitely creating a lot of buzz in the market. And ultimately, from Gamma's perspective, it's what could we do from a network infrastructure perspective. So obviously, you need to find a provider that will allow access to Microsoft Teams, be able to implement it and deploy it and support it as well. But then you need that underlying network infrastructure. So who's going to provide the SIP trunks? Who's going to provide the conformance testing to make sure those work? Who's going to provide the number porting? How am I going to bring my numbers over from my existing product? Who's going to manage that process? It's quite a complicated process. It can't just be done by anyone. And finally, who's going to provide the underlying connectivity to power this all together? Is there going to be quality of service on the voice? How's the call quality going to be? You've got to make sure you're picking all of those strands together in the right service provider. And I know the chaps at Blackstar out in the stand out there, we're more than happy to speak to you about how they're combining all the elements together and making this as a rounded product, a rounded solution. So if you're interested by this or anything you hear today, go and speak to the chaps at Blackstar and they'll happy to talk you through it. But for now, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Joe, and he's going to talk you through the rest of the presentation.
Hello, good morning everyone. So my name's Joe Pratten. I also work for Gamma. And we actually operate one of the UK's largest hosted phone systems. So I thought I was in a quite good place to talk to you today about why people are potentially moving to the cloud. So what James has just talked about is absolutely why, where is it next? That's the one. So why are people moving from ISDN into SIP? And there's some really good reasons to do that. But actually, there's a really strong reason why people want to just completely get rid of all of your on-premise hardware and move everything into the cloud. So today I'm just going to talk about some of those reasons why businesses are, a quick buyer's guide into what you should look out for, and then just to touch on some new things such as unified communications as a service. So firstly, a journey that I think all of you have been on in probably the last 20 years is you've all probably bought one of these, an on-premise phone system. This is what you've plugged your ISDNs into. Some of you may have now started to plug your SIP trunks into. But effectively, these guys are very, very good at making a telephone ring. The problem is I think over the last sort of 5 years, more and more of you have started to use other applications such as third-party conferencing to bring those conferences internally and externally together. Take Gamma as a good example. We obviously use Horizon as our phone system. We would use Skype for Business for our internal conferencing, and for external conferencing, bringing in third parties, we would use an organization called LoopUp. We found that to be a very costly decision to make, which is pushing people into this space, which is these people are providing true cloud communication services. You're probably thinking, why are you putting up all of your competitors on one screen? I think it's important for you guys to understand the competitive market space out there and who are those businesses that are providing those services. So effectively, these guys in the middle pretty much do what the guys on the left and the right do, but they do it all in the cloud without any hardware or any reliance on your on-premise services. So a lot of people think, why? You know, what's the point in it? I think, for me, one of the biggest things when I'm talking to IT managers and IT directors, it's that whole point around, if I want to make a change on the phone system, I don't want to ring up an engineering company, pay £90 remote programming, and then take a ticket and wait in a queue. What they actually want to do is log onto a portal, make that change, and for it to take effect straight away. And I'm not talking about anything complex. I'm talking about changing your on-hold music when it's Christmas time, or moving a hunt group because it snowed 2 inches and people haven't made it in. Those simple changes that you want to happen, you just want to log into a simple interface and make those changes. The next thing, for me, this is the comparison to Netflix. When you log into Netflix, you go, oh, there's a brand new film, there's a brand new series that I'm going to want to watch. The same is true for a hosted phone system. You'll log in one day and there'll be a load of new features. That's because the platform owners are constantly developing that platform and adding those new things. At Gamma, we say if you're on Horizon, your phone system's never older than 4 to 6 weeks old, because we've got developers and engineers that are constantly updating and maintaining things like security, but more importantly, features that you guys will find useful. So things like call recording. Today might not be a thing that you think about, but actually, in a year's time as your business has grown, you might decide it would be really good to have a compliant level of call recording. Well, in a hosted phone system like Horizon, that's as simple as logging in and ticking it for the users that you want to do. It's not a case of getting a quote for a big load of hardware that you need to purchase. And finally, it's kind of hard to ignore what we're all doing in our private lives, in our personal lives. We are moving everything to the cloud. I've already mentioned Netflix and Spotify, but things like, I think irony is quite a good one. So my mum always told me, never speak to a stranger on the internet and never get in a stranger's car. The other day she called an Uber, which is effectively summoning a stranger from the internet and getting in the car. All of these applications have completely changed the way that we live our lives. And I just think as a decision maker, millennials are making decisions now. They're far more likely to go to Office 365 than to buy a load of hardware to put in their server rack and to manage. You guys are busy enough as it is. Why not let the experts, the carriers, the Microsoft of the world, or Azure of the world, why not let us manage those headaches for you? So, a little bit of a buyer's guide. You might have decided, actually, I think cloud PBX might be the way to go for me. So just a few things to watch out for. So, it was certainly mentioned in the last one, security. Understand a bit more about the platform. Is it someone that's just got a little box in the shed in the back of their garden, or is it based on a tier 1 carrier? These are all questions that are really important. You want to ask about the development and the roadmap. Can I see a 12-month and a 36-month roadmap of the platform? You want to understand that there is going to be continual investment into the platform. The size and numbers, at Gamma we have around 500,000 users on the platform. That means that we can afford to have data centers and engineers constantly dialed into that platform to make sure it's operating safely. And again, accreditations. Make sure that, if you are governed by FCA or if you are governed by certain policies, that your phone system meets those policies as well. So ISO accreditation is one of those key ones. We know that the important question is price, right? It's probably the first thing that you'll look to on a proposal, right? How much is it going to cost me? What I would say is make sure that when you're looking at a hosted phone system is always done on a subscription basis, right? Each user has a subscription. Make sure you understand what those subscriptions mean. Does it include things like hunt groups, auto attendance, call forwarding, mobile integration? There are some systems out there that will have a very attractive license price and then all of a sudden a big bill at the end because you've looked at call recordings or you've used a hunt group. So it's really key to understand what those subscriptions really include. And ask yourself, do I really need a handset? Most of us in this room are probably just using a mobile. Do you offer mobile integration? Do I need loads of bits of plastic on the desk? Absolutely, there will be some people and some users that do want some handsets, but that's a key one. And then also to think about upgrades. What happens in 6 months' time, 18 months' time? Is the platform automatically upgraded within that subscription price, or is that something you need to pay on top? And then finally, that kind of golden buzzer moment when you think you found that right technology partner. What I would say is make them sweat. Ask them some really difficult questions. Ask them the questions about the accreditations. Ask them for case studies and references. And, Blackstar is a great example of a business that, quite frankly, has some amazing case studies. And being able to go and visit those reference customers. And I was actually speaking to one of them earlier who were just singing the praises of Blackstar. And I can't say how important that is. And things like, because it's a hosted platform, as long as you've got an internet connection, you should be able to do a proof of concept. You should be able to ask for a free trial for a month. So these are all really good questions that I think you should ask. And then the final one on here is professional services. Some companies will do a free of charge install, but that free of charge install may refer to you're being sent the phone and then you're sent a YouTube video for a training exercise. That is not a good install of a phone system. And believe you me, you might not want to pay that £750 for training or that £1,000 for an engineer, but it is worth its weight in gold and it will really pay dividends in the long run. So that's my kind of buyer's guide to PBX. I think I just want to close off on some of the new things that are coming onto the Gamma platform. So in March, we introduced something called Collaborate. And what I wanted to do is just take you through, my personal experience. So not loads of industry stats of why, people are using UC, but more why am I as an individual starting to use UC. So just to quickly define it, someone said to me, UC, that's just a fancy name for a phone system. I disagree. Unified communication builds on the phone system and then delivers things like instant messaging, presence, collaboration, screen share, document share, all those things that you get in Skype for Business and Teams, but also natively integrated into your phone service and your phone system. So why do you think businesses are moving or starting to consider UCaaS? Well, firstly, there's a massive cost reduction. At Gamma, we were using a platform called LoopUp, and between these four walls, we were spending £25,000 a month on call charges from that platform, because that platform was offering to call our mobiles back to join a conference, which was really convenient, but extremely costly. So make sure that you are probably spending money on it today, so that's something that you can justify this business decision with. It's a happy workforce. I'm lucky enough to work for Gamma, who invest in flexible working, and they invest in technology to allow me to work from home. And I've got an example on the next slide of actually what that really means. And I'm sure we've all probably been in a situation where you've wanted to leave an employer because they say to you, you have to travel into the centre of Bristol every day. Now, I live in Winterbourne, which is only around the corner. It took me 50 minutes to get here this morning. Just an example of why do we not just embrace flexible working a bit more? Collaborative working, if I want to get an answer from one of my product managers, I've got a group now on Collaborate. I right-click and go chat. And now I've got 7 of them all on the line, all at the same time, and I get answers very, very quickly. It also massively reduces the amount of emails that I've got of one-line questions of, have you got this report yet? That's now done over instant message and squashed within, 30 seconds of that message being sent. And then finally, I think this is probably the biggest one, and you'll see this on the next slide as an example. Travel costs. I don't know if anyone gets the train from Bristol into London. I'm fortunate enough to do that on a weekly basis. It's £109 each way. And to kind of bring this into a live example, we used to have a team meeting in London every month. Unfortunately, now that we've got Collaborate, we've stopped doing that and we do it over a web meeting. So that would include me getting up at 5 a.m. or 5:45, 6:30 train. I try and log on to the GWR Wi-Fi, never work. So I'm pretty unproductive. Would have a team meeting, have a disgusting sandwich from Pratt. I'd leave London at about 4:30, and I'm lucky if I'm home at 7 p.m. Right? The cost to me would be about £12 on coffees and sandwiches. The cost to Gamma, after you factor in trains and all the other stuff like parking and mileage, I would put an expense claim in for £230, plus all the unproductive work time. If you now look at my new day, when I do my team meetings from home, family time with Stanley, I'm lucky enough that my wife gave birth 6 weeks ago, so I've got a little baby at home, so this is even more important to me now. So I've got time to clear the inbox, I can go through, we do the meeting over Collaborate, which is video conferencing. I then have time over lunchtime to do emails, or it might be a bit of life admin, hang up the washing, whatever it may be. And it's just such an easier day, and I get so much more done, but yet we still have the same experience. And to kind of make an example of that in pictures, I spend most of my day in London squishing in with people that don't know personal space, or I spend the day with my new little boy who's really enjoying daddy time at the moment. And this is just an example of what Collaborate looks like. So you can see it's integrated into the phone system. This is an example of our internal account managers having a video conference. If you want a demo of this, we're on the stand just over there. More than happy to give you a demo of it after this session. And then finally, the kind of key takeaways is just because you've had an on-premise phone system doesn't mean you always need to have an on-premise phone system going forward. Is there a reason why you don't have a Blockbusters card now and everyone's got a Netflix account? There are plenty of reasons to move to the cloud. Ask difficult questions of those suppliers. Make sure that you're making them sweat and putting them through the paces. Ask them about ISO accreditations. Ask them about the carrier. Ask those difficult questions. And then finally, embrace unified communications. I don't think there's an option there. I think you will generally start to lose staff, become less efficient, and it just makes life a lot easier for everyone else. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.